Hi, my name is Alice Savage. I'm a Cambridge University Press author, and I teach at a community college where I get to work with students from many different countries, different nationalities, different language backgrounds, different skill levels. But one thing they pretty much all of them have in common is that they'd like to speak a little bit more accurately. Grammar. They want grammar. And that's my job. So we work a lot with the grammar in the book, and they learn to manipulate rules and fill in blanks, write sentences, and take tests. But I feel like I have this responsibility to do something more, and that is provide stepping stones to more fluent and accurate interactions when they speak with people outside of the classroom. Because if you think about it, if you can put a laser light focus on taking a test, you're probably going to do better than when there are all these things competing for your cognitive resources in a conversation. I know this because when I meet somebody new, I often forget their name because so much information is coming at me at once. I can't retain it. Hopefully you're better at that and you can remember people's names. But this idea of you're listening, you're trying to think about what you're going to say next, recalling memories, a lot is going on in a conversation. And it's no wonder that grammar is hard. You add on the anxiety of being in your second language and perhaps the job interview that you're taking the English class to prepare for in the first place. And yeah, it's going to be difficult. So these stepping stones, how do we provide these stepping stones that take grammar from that grammar book and put it into some real life? So at least move it in that direction. So what I've become very excited about recently is embodied learning, which is using your physicality, your voice, your senses, even your emotions, which are embodied as part of the lesson. And that's context. And context and communicative language learning go together very well. Now, to illustrate, I want you to think about something. When was the last time you felt really stressed? Where did you feel it in your body? Did you get a headache? Did your neck hurt? What about your back? Some people feel it in their belly. That's maybe not a fun memory, but think about another one. When you fall in love, you get butterflies, your cheeks turn pink, you can't stop smiling. Your body shows your emotions and it feels your emotions, and you probably remember it pretty well. I like to remember holding a baby because I'm flooded with a hormone called oxytocin, makes me feel happy. So we do know that our emotions are felt in our body. And I'm sure you've heard about muscle memory, in which people remember directions and how to get places just by letting their body do it. Some people can't spell something unless they write it down. So let's tap into that a little bit, as well as something else, which is the power of having an experience, especially a narrative experience, in aiding recall. So there are a lot of things here that we can look at. Some more that I want to address are, aside from the fact that oxygen improves flow to the brain, it also improves productivity. So there's a researcher named Wendy Suzuki. She's a neuroscientist, and she gives this TED talk that I watched as I was preparing for this session. And she said, not only are we wired for stories and wired to remember things that are meaningful to us, but when we move, we do things a little bit better. When she started exercising, she started to feel more creative when she did grant writing. And my own son did a Sudoku test where he would do a Sudoku and it might take him 12 minutes. And then he would run around the track, and then he would do another Sudoku, and the average was 8 minutes. So exercise and movement tend to be pretty good. There are other things that are visual. Other research says that students perform better on a test with blue cues than a test with red cues. Some of that signaling of what those colors mean. And some really cool studies are the fact that college students who retell a story using gestures remember more details and more accurate details than students who are not allowed to use gestures. And kids were able to solve math problems better when they were able to use a gesture to do it. So I think that fits what we kind of intuitively know, is that when we engage the body, we can remember better. And I don't know if this is helpful, but did you know that octopuses have brain in their arms? So there's a little bit of intelligence in the way those different arms move in different directions. So it's not just us, it's also marine animals. So I like to share a few activities, and the first one is called Sticky Ball. And here's how it works. I ask students to stand 6 feet apart because we're socially distanced. And then I pretend to have a kind of sticky ball in my hand. And then I say to a student, let's say Jose, hey, Jose, would you like a sticky ball? And then Jose should say yes and repeat, yes, I would like a sticky ball. So I throw the sticky ball to Jose. He has to catch it. It's still sticky. Then he repeats, thank you for the sticky ball. Then he changes the adjective to something new. Let's say a hot ball. So then it becomes hard to handle, and he changes how he uses his body, and he has to throw it to another person. So he might say, hey, Lupita, would you like a hot ball? And Lupita says yes. And so he throws the hot ball to Lupita, and she has a hot ball, switches out the adjective, and then throws it to somebody else. In this way, students are alert, moving, using their body to really get to know that adjective, and having a lot of fun at the same time. Another activity is a little bit different. You can post signs around the room that are adverbs of frequency. So if it's pretty low level, you could just use never, always, and sometimes. As your levels move up and you want to do it again, then you could add other ones. But let's just start with never, always, and sometimes in different parts of the room. You can say sentences, and then students can move to the part of the room that fits who they are. So if I say, who plays chess? So people who never play chess will go to never. People who always play chess can go to their corner, and people who sometimes play chess can go to a different corner. Probably often would be a good one for that one. And then they could repeat the sentences. I never play chess. I always play chess. I sometimes play chess. And then you could talk about where sometimes goes. And you can keep repeating that with other sentences. Who eats eggs for breakfast? I sometimes eat eggs for breakfast. Who arrives early for parties? I never arrive early for parties. So students get to connect to the meaning of the sentence to their own habits, and actually move their body and commit to an answer. So if they can't do this, they can't understand you. So that's another benefit, is that you know what they are thinking. Another way that you can work with that is through Klein. So you could have students organize themselves from tallest to shortest, Or, once that's clear, you could, who has the longest commute to who has the shortest commute. If you want more conversation, you can say, who is the busiest? Who is the most adventurous? Leave the room, let them figure it out and put themselves in a line. And when they're in the line, they say the sentence. So that's a lot of fun. Another one is a little bit different. It's a kind of a role play. And it was inspired by a box of kittens that my son brought home from his theater class one day, and I had to find homes for. What if we could use that to practice don't, doesn't, and simple present tense verbs? So what I do is get the students in a circle, and of course they can be 6 feet apart in a circle, and the one in the middle has a box of kittens. So that student is trying to give away kittens, and you want to direct the other students to try not to take a kitten. So maybe it's better if the teacher models it at the beginning and then gives it to a volunteer and then it moves around. And that would be to say, hey, Son, do you want a kitten? And Son says, no, I don't like cats. And so you can't give it to Son, so you try somebody else. You might say, hey, Nee, I really need to get rid of these kittens. This kitten is so cute. Don't you want this kitten? And Nee says, no, I don't have time for a kitten. And somebody else could say, I don't have money. I can't pay for food. So my apartment doesn't allow kittens. So there are different ways that students could be creative in answering that question. Now, you heard me give a lot of different kinds of examples. So that would indicate that this would be intermediate or a little bit higher, because students have to invent their answer and they have to try to use don't or doesn't. So it's kind of at that intersection where you're trying to get them to deliberately use the grammar structure in a controlled environment, but there's this communicative purpose that's layered onto it. And I find that it's very difficult for students, but it's a place where they can become aware of their habits of perhaps not putting the S on does, or forgetting to say do in their sentence. Now, of course, in an ESOL situation like mine, a lot of my students are there because they have grammatical habits that they're hoping to change. We used to call it fossilized errors. I don't know if that term is still used, but it is something that when we work on it, it helps my students have more confidence. Now, in some contexts, that might not be as appropriate, but it is something that I get feedback on, that's what they like. We all know present simple is a hard one. Another one that you can do with the kitten is have other students give advice using should. And that I can adapt an activity from an improv or what is there's something that there's a kind of theater and learning, and I'll think of it in just a second. But it's called an alley, and you have students on 2 lines, and they speak to somebody who walks down the line. So maybe the person on the right gives advice about how you should get a kitten, and the person on the left tells you why you should not get a kitten. And you go down the line and you listen. And at the end, you've heard a lot of different advice using should, and you can decide and tell everybody why you are going to get the kitten or not get the kitten, right? Yeah. Process drama. I think is what it's called. And it's a great thing if you ever want to look it up, because it's about students playing out roles with the teacher and really creating a dynamic environment in the classroom. Let's look at a few examples of things that people could say with the you should or you shouldn't. If the yellow is one side, the person walking down the middle is green, and the kind of orange side would be you shouldn't. So that one is a lot of fun. Sometimes it helps just to have students read a little mini dialogue that gives them a chance to show some emotions in what they're saying. Because sometimes in learning another language, we're so focused on getting the words right that we don't always think about the intentions or the pragmatics. And then you layer in the pronunciation of the S, and it can get, it can get really comforting to be able to just read a dialogue. So in this one that I could use with a low level, they can play around with it. So A could say, he doesn't know. And B, oh, he knows. No, he doesn't. He doesn't know. He does. He doesn't. He doesn't? No, he doesn't. Oh. Now, there are different ways you could play with it, but you can see that students can take on the role and have a little fun showing these kinds of prosodic features when they do their dialogues. One thing I tell students is that if I don't hear the S or the verb ending on the past tense, then maybe I don't write with it. So what we hear is often what we write, and there's an influence there. So I do try to help call their attention to it when it's appropriate. So these things are all designed to help students to take those steps across to deliberate use of language in context, or deliberately showing understanding of meaning, and maybe help them bridge that grammar to the outside world. Now, in order to make it work, I think it's very important that students are comfortable. So sometimes that means that as a teacher, I have to be the first person to model something, and I have to be a little bit silly if I want to act out an adverb or something like that. And I just do it, even though I'm naturally kind of introverted, because if I do it first, then the students seem a little bit more comfortable doing it themselves. And the more that happens, the more people loosen up and are able to generate ideas and improvise and do all the things that you do in activities, but you also have to do when you're in real conversations, and particularly high stakes conversations like job interviews or public speaking. Now, in some contexts like middle school or high school, maybe even elementary school, I would think that you would have to have protocols for behavior so that people don't say mean things to each other. You can even have an activity where one day you create a poster with rules for behavior. So some teachers find that helpful. But the most important thing about making these work, I think, is to make sure that you've used your book well, and that students are very comfortable with the pattern and are able to bring in those other layers so that they can integrate the grammar and meaning and context into a full fluent conversation. There's been much talk in the research about iteration. The more you practice telling a story, the better you get at telling a story. And again, the more cognitive resources you can bring to bear on issues of accuracy. Finally, these take up a little time, and they're, you have to set them up and you have to devote classroom resources to it. But in my mind, it's worth it, because when it's going well, the students kind of run with it, and I hear them laughing. They're elaborating, they're kind of playing with language in a way that Guy Cook talks about it as something. People enjoy the collaborative nature of it, but also there's a little bit of a competitive nature of it. Like sometimes we debate or we joke or we use imaginary language. When students are talking and laughing, you know that they're understanding each other and they're feeling really good about their ability to communicate. So, and we'll just keep the classroom a dynamic place that can do what it does well, and that's social learning. There's a lot we can move online now, but being together, forming a circle, and being able to interact with each other in that way is probably going to be with us for a long time. I did want to just add one last postscript about adapting these for online. It occurs to me that a lot of my pictures show students without masks and being able to breathe on each other as they will. And so, but the idea is not that we have to have that kind of freedom in order to do kinesthetic grammar activities and make learning, turning learning into role play and improvisation. We can arrange the classroom to be socially distanced, and we can even do some of them virtually, like sticky ball. If you say the name of a student before you throw it, then that student can still catch it. Or with a dialogue, you can still use your voice to communicate indignation or reluctance or disagreement or something else like that. So I'm sure you'll figure out a lot of fun ways to do it, and you probably already have, but I think that we're going to see more and more of these opportunities as we go forward. Thank you for your time.